You used to dream once too. But then you became smart, reliable, sensible. But then, why does it feel so empty inside? We're working hard to reach our first 1,000 subscribers. Every click matters more than you think. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. Don't miss what really matters. He woke up at 4:17 a.m., drenched in sweat. Everything was calm. The apartment, the bed, silence. But inside, it was like someone was screaming. Not with a voice, with feeling. You took the wrong turn. It wasn't panic. It wasn't fear. It was being too late. Like the train had already left. And he was standing on the platform. Calm, confident, rational, but with no chance to go back. Thomas had always believed in his head, not his feelings. While others trusted their intuition, he calculated. While they said, "My heart tells me," he built spreadsheets. "You overthink everything," his ex had once told him. "That's exactly why I have stability," he'd replied. The choice that changed everything was simple, at first glance. Company A, International Corporation. Contract, salary, apartment, status. Company B, unknown startup. Newcomers, chaos, small team, half the salary. But there was one detail. When he spoke with the startup founder, something alive seemed to ignite in his chest. Something he hadn't felt in a long time. He left the startup office at the end of the meeting and got in his car. On his phone, a message from the corporation's HR. "We're waiting for the signed contract today by 7 p.m. He opened the Notes app. Created a table. Pros and cons. Startup. Risk. Instability. Drive. Purpose. Corporation. Comfort. Stability. Predictability. Someone else's path. He called his friend. "Are you crazy?" "Of course, the corporation. You're a grown man, not a dreamer." Called his father. "Choose reliability. Intuition is for poets." And he chose. Like an adult. Like someone sensible. Like someone smart. That evening he dialed the startup founder's number. "Thank you for trusting me. But I've made a different decision. I understand. Good luck to you. Just know, some doors close forever." Pause. His heart skipped. But he said, "I weighed everything carefully." The first weeks at the corporation were normal. Office with coffee. Steady paycheck. Meetings. Expensive watch on his wrist. Quiet evening with a laptop. He told himself, "You're on the right path." But every night he woke up earlier. With the feeling that he wasn't living, but just going through someone else's schedule. 2 months later he saw the news. XYZ startup receives $12 million investment from fund. In the photo, that same founder. Smile. Presentation. Wall of logos. Thomas's chest tightened again. Only now, sharply. You knew, but you went against it. You heard, and didn't listen. He reviewed the correspondence. Voice messages. How the eyes of the people he chose not to see had lit up. And remembered his own smile. The one from the startup meeting. And the one that had been missing for 3 weeks now. On Sunday he was riding the subway. Everything was familiar. People, light, sound. But inside, again that voice. You betrayed yourself. You did everything right, just not authentically. 4 months passed. Thomas got a promotion. He led projects, communicated with international clients, went on business trips. Everyone said, "You're doing great. You've built everything perfectly." And only he knew, inside, something important had died. Morning, 7:12 a.m. He stands in the shower and feels the water running down his body. Warm, soft, but the sensations, like stones. He didn't want to go to work. Not because of laziness, but because everything in him was protesting, wordlessly. He looked in the mirror and asked himself, "Is this you? This shirt, this briefcase, this office, is this everything you wanted?" And the voice inside whispered, "You chose the wrong door." In the lunch hall, a colleague said, "Remember that startup where they offered you a position? They just became part of Google. Multi-million turnovers, explosive growth. You can't get in there now." Thomas nodded. "Yeah, I saw. They have a cool product." Took a sip of coffee. Said it all calmly, but inside, everything clenched. He went to the restroom. Locked the door. Stood against the wall. And, for the first time in a long time, couldn't hold back. Tears. Not loud ones. Not hysteria. Just tears from silence. It wasn't envy. It was recognition. You could have been there. That was your path. But you were afraid to be alive. He opened his laptop, found the startup's website, team, news, videos. They were real. They were themselves. And he was someone he never wanted to be. Convenient, reliable, dead. He remembered that day of choice. Remembered how his heart beat faster when he left that meeting. It wasn't foolishness. It was a calling. It was yours. And you traded it for a safe salary. On Friday he came home at 9:40 p.m. Quiet apartment, microwaved dinner, opened his laptop, and just sat. For a long time. At 10:15 p.m. he wrote a letter. Recipient, that same founder. Hi, I don't know if you remember me. I just wanted to say, you were right back then. Sometimes, logic is cowardice disguised as maturity. And if I could go back, I wouldn't have made spreadsheets. I would have just listened to my heart. He didn't hit send. Closed the letter. Saved it in drafts. Because he knew, they weren't waiting for him there anymore. The train had left. Forever. He did everything right. Every morning, alarm, breakfast, subway, office, work, reports, evening, Netflix, sleep, loop, logical, structured, predictable, just as he'd always wanted. But every morning he woke up with the same feeling, you're somewhere you don't belong. You gave up something important. You're not a person, you're a function. They called him reliable, stable, someone you can count on. And he looked at himself in the mirror and saw a person he no longer recognized. Once a month he visited that startup's website, not to complain to fate, but just to look at those who chose differently, at those who took the risk. They launched a new product. Forbes interview, photos from Singapore, Berlin, New York. And somewhere in the background, the person who once told him, if you change your mind, write. But we won't have time. And he really didn't write. He tried to convince himself that everything was fine. You don't have to be happy. You have to be useful. Stability is victory. Where there's drive, there's failure. Lies. Rational, convenient lies. Once he went to an old acquaintance's presentation. The guy talked about launching projects. About how he left the corporation. About the voice inside that you need to learn to trust. Thomas listened, and suddenly realized, he knows what the guy is talking about. Just too late. After the presentation he stood by the wall with a glass of wine. A person approached him. You're Thomas, right? We've met somewhere. Maybe. You work at Invexa, right? Great company. Must be good there. He nodded. Yeah, it's fine. Are you satisfied? Pause. He wanted to say, yes. But instead, sometimes, to get what you want, you first need to understand who you are. And the person fell silent. At home he opened the letter in drafts. That same draft for the startup founder. Read it. Rewrote it. I'm not writing to ask for another chance. I just want to admit that I made a choice that didn't include me. I was logical, reasonable, adult. But I wasn't alive. And now I don't know how to get back. Just, thank you for offering me to be myself back then. I didn't accept. But now I at least understand what I lost. Hit send. And closed the laptop. Outside there was wind. Cold, October wind. Thomas stood up, walked to the window, and suddenly realized, for the first time in a long time, he's not planning anything. And it doesn't scare him. Thomas started waking up more often in the middle of the night. Not from nightmares, from silence, the kind that doesn't comfort but suffocates. He could stare at the ceiling for hours, going through the day's events in his head, and everything seemed unreal. As if he wasn't living but playing someone else's life. At work he got promoted. They gave him a certificate. Applause. New office. He stood with a champagne glass, smiling. And only one thought echoed in his head. What if I was never supposed to be here? That evening he walked home. An hour and a half through cold streets. No headphones, no calls, just walked, and felt everything unnecessary falling away from him. He remembered how as a child he dreamed of making games. Drew flowcharts, stories, characters. And then they told him, find something stable. All that isn't serious. He found it. He became reliable, smart, but not himself. A couple of days later he was called to a meeting. New project, responsibility, presentation. He listened, nodded, took notes. And in his head, noise. Not words, just noise. He couldn't hear what they were saying. He only felt, he didn't want this. Not this presentation. Not this room. Not these people. He took vacation. For the first time in 2 years. Colleagues said, "Are you tired?" He replied, "No, I just want to understand where I'm going." He went to the sea. Alone. No plan. No reservations. No goal. Just to be. Every morning he woke up early. Looked at the water. Drank coffee. Was silent. And gradually began to hear himself. On the 5th day he opened his laptop. Opened a folder he hadn't touched since college. Game ideas, sketches. There were old concepts. Naive. Clumsy. But alive. He started rewriting one. Without purpose. Just because for the first time in a long time, he wanted to. That evening he wrote in Telegram to a friend he hadn't seen in 6 years. "Remember, you offered to do something together? I refused back then. Maybe we can try again?" The reply came in a minute. "Are you serious? I dreamed that you'd write this someday." He didn't quit his job the next day. Didn't sell his apartment. Didn't fly to Thailand. No, he just took the first step back to himself. That evening he looked at the sea again. And thought, maybe intuition isn't magic? Maybe it's just me, the real one, the one I didn't listen to for too long. 3 years passed. Thomas didn't become a millionaire. He didn't sell a startup. Didn't blow up the market. He just became different. Now he works from home. Develops indie games. Writes stories. Some people say, too unstable. You were in a big company. Why all this? He smiles. Doesn't argue. Because now he knows. No external guarantees can replace the feeling that you're in your right place. Sometimes he wakes up at night. But not in panic. From inspiration. And instead of anxious thoughts, now he has an idea. He often remembers that moment of choice. The founder, the team's eyes, that chance. Sometimes it still burns inside. But it's no longer the pain of loss. It's a memory of the turn where he went the wrong way. But then found the way back. Not as fast, not as loud, but his own. One day he receives a letter. From that same founder. Short. "Hi, saw your game. Cool that you finally started doing what was yours from the beginning. Respect." He rereads the letter several times. And feels, he's back. Late at night he sits in his small studio. Outside the window, lights. On the screen, code, graphics, test build. He drinks cold coffee. And suddenly remembers that same night. 4 a.m. Sweat. Panic. Feeling of loss. And now, only silence. But different. Alive. Real. The kind where you can hear your heart. He plays an old voice message. His voice, once recorded on a dictaphone. "I did everything right. But why does it feel like everything's wrong?" He smiles. "Because you listened to your head. But you should have listened to yourself." He deletes the file. Because now everything is in its place. At the end of the week he publishes his first full game. No publisher. No advertising campaign. Just as it is. And gets the first review. "I don't know why, but there's something very honest in your game. As if you put yourself into it." He reads it. And feels tears welling up. Because for the first time, it's true. He chose the safe path. He did everything right. He listened to the voice of logic. But his heart knew. It whispered. Then screamed. Then went silent. And then, he was alone. In a life he didn't choose. And only when everything external collapsed, he began to listen. Not to noise. Not to advice. But to himself. We're afraid to trust intuition because it can't be measured. But it's exactly what? The compass of the real I. Sometimes, to find your path, you first need to get lost. Ask yourself, where is your life leading? Who's choosing it? You or fear? And how much longer can you not listen to yourself before you completely lose the connection?